The German Grand Prix was at Hockenheim, which is near Heidelberg. Or if you like dueling cars better than racing cars, Heidelberg is near Hockenheim. It's pretty much of a toss-up. Hockenheim is a Teutonic test track for the Titanic turbos. The quickest normally aspirated cars were a breathless 2 seconds down on any turbo except the Tolman, but during practice, the rain did its best to even things out. It turned the cars into hydrofoils and came very close to killing Peroni, who had a crash just like Villeneuve's. His injuries, especially to his right leg, were fearsome, and the race started minus its fastest qualifier, although some light was shed through the overcast by the welcome news that his injuries weren't as terminal as had at first been thought. The sport depends on its star drivers. Cars by themselves are short of character, although the Renaults always try to keep you guessing, like the kind of woman who says yes every second time. At home, they had kept going until the end. Could they do it here? Arnoux led Prost away, but almost immediately Piquet's Brabham BMW was in amongst them, since once again the Brabham grand plan for a fast first half plus mid-race moratorium was in operation. All the Brabhams had to do was get there, and they would be rewarded by fresh fuel from the refrigerator and hot tyres from the oven. Piquet got in front of Arnoux, and the plan looked as if it might work for once, for him at least, although there was still a long way to go until half-time. But for Patrese, the pit stop came early because of a cooked piston. So that left Piquet, only one man for the big plan. Piquet was approaching the first ever halfway halt for cool fuel. Nothing could go wrong. Everything had been foreseen, except the awkward presence of Salazar in the run-up to the new Mickey Mouse Ostkurve chicane. Salazar was supposed to drop back, but apparently had not read the stage directions. Piquet was calm, however. He greeted Salazar affectionately. Piquet and Salazar go to karate class together, and here was a chance to practice a few routines. This could be the high point of Salazar's career, so let's see it again. Bernie Eccleston, plugged into the whole world by personal radio, probably heard the news from Japan. The Brabham mechanics went back to the dressing room. Tambay powered on in the lead, but the tension had evaporated. Now there would have to be another race before we could finally discover if the Brabham could go all the way half full after going halfway half empty. Lafitte had got the Tolbo going again after a miserable season. But all overcome at having passed two cars at once, Lafitte slid off. More seriously, from the championship angle, Watson's long grind from behind came to an end. Tambay, whose life was turning into a dream, won his first Grand Prix. Rosberg came third, scoring 4 valuable points. Tambay took the flag for Ferrari. Arnoux finished ahead of Rosberg, but was behind him in the championship. The two turbos waved to the crowd, while Watson was still looking for the hole his points had drained out of. So Tambay liked Formula 1 after all. His teammate Peroni still theoretically led the championship, but wouldn't be racing anymore this year. So that meant it was Watson and then Rosberg. The guys who had no chance were still coming first and second. South to Austria and the Österreich Ring, the fastest circuit in the calendar, where the sun came out and ruminating cows asked themselves the question, could any of the allegedly invincible turbos hold together long enough to make its driver champion of the world? Or could a normally aspirated human being take all? The outside chance that it might be louder was enough to bring the locals flocking. But when the clamour of the 150 miles per hour practice laps died down, there was no getting round the fact that the first 5 qualifiers were all turbos. The Italian Air Force was there on a goodwill mission. Bernie came back from a meeting with Balestri, and there was almost a collision. The O-ring did a bit of a Brands hatch at the start, with both Alphas being instantly eliminated. At the normal speed of the human eyeball, it was hard to tell which bit belonged to which car. All you could be certain of was that Giacomelli and De Cesaris had played havoc with each other's no-claims bonus. While Piquet and Patrese screamed off into the distance, the Austrian television service went back for another lingering look at the mass destruction. It turned out that De Cesaris had taken immense trouble to get all the way across the track in order to ram his teammate. Why this should have been so, nobody knew. While the Alphas were being put back together so they could be thrown away, Piquet led Patrese, and the big plan was going like a military operation. Although nobody knew which military operation. It might have been Arnhem. The 2 Renaults were behind the 2 Brabhams after Tambay punctured a tyre. It was tough on Tambay. It was tougher on Alboreto, who had to walk home. Tambay got back to the pits for a new tyre and was able to go on. Patrese was now in the lead. Piquet was going backwards because of blistered tyres, so his half of the big plan misfired. But for Patrese, the magic moment had arrived. The Brabham mechanics were out of their dressing room and in position. Patrese came in for the first planned pit stop since the days when Fangio won the 1957 German Grand Prix with an extended interval for a drink and a smoke. Patrese was up on the jacks for a grand total of 14 seconds, while the cool fuel was pumped in under pressure and the crispy fried slicks Gas Mark 7 were put on with oven gloves. Then he was out again. The first successful split-raised pit pause in modern history. Was this the shape of things to come? If so, it would have to include what happened to Patrese next. He was still in the lead according to the plan, but according to the plan, Prost was supposed to fade away on those dreary old tyres that had spent half the race going around in circles instead of baking gently in the stove. But or, to put it another way, but the BT-50 blew its engine and with locked back wheels frisbeed towards the crowd, which the Lord in his wisdom had placed on a hill with a little grass ha-ha at ground level, just big enough to stop a racing car going sideways out of control. Patrese had a lot of luck, so did a lot of spectators, including the kind of girl who has to get into trouble before she believes that you can get pregnant standing up. Prost's Renault took over the lead, while Patrese walked home. De Angelis in the Lotus was doing amazingly well, right up behind the Renault, which after a few tours duly collapsed under the responsibility, signalling defeat with the now standard tongues of flame. Prost prepared for yet another long walk. Meanwhile, De Angelis drove on like a man in a dream, but with Rosberg looming in his mirrors. For the few remaining laps, De Angelis coped with fuel starvation, while Rosberg got closer and closer. Rosberg, who must have been wondering all season just what he had to do to win a race, got as close as he could possibly go while still coming second. It was the ideal finish, the one that hardly ever happens. For De Angelis, it was a totally unexpected yet richly merited first victory in a Grand Prix. But in the championship, before you got to De Angelis, it was Rosberg, Watson, Lauda and Prost. In the age of the turbo, the first two cars were still breathing ordinary air, just like people. The Swiss Grand Prix was held at Dijon in France, forecasting the age when the Tibetan Grand Prix will be held in Tasmania. But although Dijon boasts the bloodiest-minded officials in the whole Formula 1 firmament, it has the compensation of being situated in that part of France where they manufacture Burgundy. The Lauda fans had unrolled their old battle banners, but there was also a sizable Rosberg rooting section who had trekked in from Finland with barely enough time to construct their pro-Keken placards. So sudden had been the rise to world fame of their new national hero. Could Keken do it? Surely Watson couldn't. Was it true that the Brabhams planned to turn around halfway and come back in the opposite direction? And how come these questions had even arisen when the turbos were supposed to be unbeatable? The laid-back Lauda let it all go by. For the nth time, the two Renaults were up there like the Everly brothers, with Arnoux secure in the knowledge that he would be driving for Ferrari next year, so it didn't really matter so much if the somewhat alienated Renault mechanics had forgotten to screw the car together. After all, they never did anyway. There were no Ferraris because Tambay had gone home with a compressed neck nerve, a pleasure made possible by those unique rules of modern Grand Prix racing, which ensure that all road shock will be transmitted directly to the driver's spine. The Brabhams, with Lauda getting in between them, ran very reliably but not especially fast, the reverse of their usual priorities. Prost took the lead from Arnoux. Arnoux went backwards until Piquet went past him. Piquet was once again scheduled to make the now notorious half-time hot tyre halt, even if Patrese wasn't, so the big plan was still at least 50% operative. Watson came in for tyres and skirts and his chances seemed to vanish. Piquet, to the great excitement of the pensive planet, for the second time in history made it all the way to the big planned central caesura. It all happened in a flash. The Brabham drum majorettes did the dance of the pneumatic wrench, and out went Piquet, theoretically with renewed energy. Watson went past him 2 laps behind, but a lot of other people were in front. Not just the Renaults, but Rosberg and Lauda, who were held up for a bad quarter of an hour by De Cesaris, not wanting to be lapped. Some say that De Cesaris is a French secret agent, others that he is an incurable featherhead, but none deny that he makes his presence felt. Finally, Rosberg charged away even from Lauda. De Cesaris had spun off in order to get in front of Rosberg twice, but by now Rosberg was after the Renaults, and De Cesaris was just part of the landscape. Rosberg's Williams went past Arnoux' Renault. De Cesaris somehow managed to include himself in the party, and Rosberg brandished his gearbox angrily. Arnoux' Renault was so shocked it came into the pits for more fuel before going out again to die of scrambled electronics in the injection system. It was hard on Arnoux, but no easier on Prost, because with only 1 lap to victory, he had Rosberg filling his mirrors like von Richthofen. The Renault was faster in the straights, but Rosberg was making straights out of the curves. The will found the means, and Rosberg got through. There was nothing Prost or any other Frenchman could do, even though the man with the checkered flag, who had considered waving it 2 laps early on Prost's behalf, now considered putting it out a few laps late in case Prost caught up again. But Rosberg kept on going flat out until he saw the flag. When in France, you must do as Jonesy did. One hand on your wallet, the other on your crotch. Keep smiling, but keep going. So it was the big finish. Rosberg had won his first Grand Prix and probably the whole championship along with it. With Pironi out, Prost was effectively second, 11 points down, and Lauda and Watson equal third behind Prost. There was no champagne because the Williams team is backed by Arabs. Italy and the Ferrari assembly shop. Race fans gather to pray for the destruction of the opposing teams. Children bribe pigeons to evacuate on the heads of opposing teams. Fans draw lots for the privilege of running onto the track after the Ferraris have won, in order to be killed by opposing cars which have not yet finished. Policemen discuss which opposing team driver should be arrested for speeding. At Monza, it was turbo time again, and the only surprise was that the pole-sitter was ex-world champion Mario Andretti, the nearest thing Ferraris could find to an Italian driver. Bernie got back just in time from selling the Vatican Grand Prix to the Pope. Balestri's Air Force tried to cut him off. But with the Pope in his pocket, Bernie had that extra something, and the official battle continued overhead. The Italian tifosi either didn't realize that Andretti is an American or else didn't care. They turned up in impressive numbers to watch Ferrari win, which is the only thing that really matters to them. Away went the 6 turbos, with Piquet in the lead. There was the occasional small fracas among the minor men, but otherwise the pattern of the race was clear. The turbos were going to race each other until they fell apart. Tambay was in the lead, which wasn't as good as Andretti being in the lead from the Italian viewpoint, but was almost as good. But then the Italians had to cope with the unspeakable sight of a yellow car going past a red one. Later on, Patrese also got past Tambay and crowded Arnoux. For the Italians, the disaster was unmitigated. It didn't help when one of their Ocellas shed a wheel for lightness and redrew the course by cutting out one of the chicanes. The Brabhams went out with a Duff clutch each, and Watson started his famous burn from the stern. Up at the front, the Renaults were racing the Ferraris. Andretti, plagued with a sticky throttle, dropped back, but Tambay was holding second place and was immediately elected an honorary Italian by the Tifosi. Rosberg did the burst from behind, but wasn't helped by a missing rear wing, which turned the Williams into a Volkswagen. Tambay and Prost were still contesting second place when Rosberg went in for a new tailplane. Prost retired with laryngitis in the fuel injection to the rapturous cheers of the sportsmanlike Italians. That left Arnoux. Arnoux finally ran out the winner, but the Italian crowd decided not to lynch him because he would be driving for Ferrari next year. So they poured onto the track in their usual attempt to be mown down in great numbers by cars that had not yet finished the race. An Italian sacrificial ceremony, which it is said that not even the Japanese fully understand. Arnoux was first on the dais, but he was far back in the points. The big news was who was almost on the dais. Watson, after a fine drive against the odds, had come in fourth, thus putting himself only 9 points behind Rosberg. Suppose Watty came first in Las Vegas and Rosberg came nowhere at all. Or to put it the other way around, all that Rosberg had to do was come fifth in Las Vegas, whereas if Watson didn't win, he wouldn't be world champion. Both Watson and Rosberg had a lot to think about as they flew back across the Atlantic to be confronted by the large hole in the desert, to which at one point water has been added in order to form Las Vegas. If it was a long shot, Las Vegas was just the place to watch it come in. Superficially devoted to games of chance, Vegas is actually more predictable than Moscow. Nothing happens there except a steady mechanical subtracting of money from the punters. It makes a nice change to have a genuinely unpredictable event in which the house and the gamblers all start even. Even the turbos and the Cosworths were starting even, because Caesar's Palace car park offers little in the way of long straights and all too much in terms of a pain in the driver's neck. Stamina counts at Las Vegas, especially when it's hot, and it was very. The threat of rain having been staved off at the last minute by yet another high-level initiative from Bernie. It should have been too hot for the turbos, but on the green light, Prost led Arnoux in a running dogfight that quickly pulled away from the rest of the field. Alboretto's Tyrrell was third, going unexpectedly fast. But with all eyes on the needle match up front, it was easy to miss the progress of Watson, who was doing his biggest attack from the back number yet. From 9th place on the grid, he sank back even further in order to make sure he was near the rear before starting to move forward. Watson went past a lot of people before he caught Rosberg, who realized that Watson might very well win in this mood, in which case the smart place for Rosberg would be a nice safe fifth. But Tracy dropped out as part of some big plan to create a diversion. Alboretto's licorice green stove enamel Tyrrell was embarrassingly close behind Arnoux' Renault. Watson charged on in search of the impossible, which was looking more possible all the time. Hobbled by a sulking cylinder, Arnoux hid in the pits from Alboretto and dreamed of his first Ferrari. Andretti's Ferrari had Rosberg up its tail and developed a rectal fissure in the rear suspension. The resulting slide gave Andretti just time to catch the mid-afternoon plane to Michigan and leave Town Bay to collect the Constructors' Championship. Rosberg resisted the impulse to climb out every few hundred yards and check the tyre pressures. De Angelis's Lotus converted itself into a North Sea oil rig. Brit oil. The new lightweight Tolman was only 11 tons instead of 12 and spun off as a consequence. And all the time, Alboreto closed on Prost. Alboreto passed Prost, a move simply bound to make the Renault feel ill. Alboreto kept running first and Rosberg fifth, which was all either of them needed. Watson came second to Alboreto, and it was just, but only just, not enough. Alboreto, who nobody ever guessed would be there, was there in first place. The fifth-place man, to the confusion of the watching Americans, shook his fist in the air as if he had won everything. And so the Grand Prix year of 1982 ended on the victory dais at Vegas. Nobody really knew who Alboreto was, except that he had arrived. The Americans were politely enthusiastic, as if they understood it all. Watson thought about what might have been, although what had been was amazing enough. The three of them had been joined by Diana Ross. They were the Supremes, live in Las Vegas. And that's what the champagne really means. It means alive. This year, the rules and the cars had hurt too many people. For that bitter taste in the mouth, you needed golden bubbles. What would happen next year? Would there be solid steel tyres, an asbestos Renault, a Brabham running on liquid dynamite with a pit stop every lap so that Bernie could slap on more advertisements? Had Balestri really been entered in the Miss World contest? The rumours flew. But nothing could diminish the finish. Keke Rosberg was the moustache of the moment.
You and Michael